a great day, I'm feeling good. Oh, the possibilities of what I could.
What happens when a blind man, a woman of color, and a child of immigrants get together to discuss how diversity, inclusion, and equity affect your business?
Hi everybody, welcome to the Choose Inclusion podcast. I'm UB and I am the Latino white guy of the group.
I'm Nina. I am the woman of color in the group.
And I'm Mike. I'm the blind guy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Choose Inclusion. Super happy to be with you again today. My name is Mike Hess. And as always, I am joined by my amazing co-hosts, Nina and Ubaldo. Team, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
You know what? I did some spring skiing yesterday, so I got a little bit of the raccoon look going right now, Nina. But it's an amazing time in the Rocky Mountain region. And I'm super excited this morning, guys, because we're talking to a guest that, so many times we've talked about accessibility from, you need to do this and it's a compliance thing. It's a regulatory thing. And today's guest, we're actually going to get to talk about, the benefit of a major global brand that commits time and resources into this, because quite honestly, yes, it's the right thing to do, but there's good economics behind it. So ladies and gentlemen, we're joined this morning by Mr. Mark Jones. Mark is the manager of accessibility for the Walt Disney Resort campus. I think that's the right word, Mark, in Orlando, Florida, for guests with disabilities. And so, Mark, welcome to the Choose Inclusion podcast.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Mike and the team, hello. Thank you. Appreciate you having me join you today.
Mark, I'm so glad to talk to you. I reached out to you on LinkedIn just because I'm always keeping my eye and ear open for, folks who are kind of posting about, things that are accessible and that sort of thing. And I like your lens on things, because it's so much about the physical accessibility, right? Which again, there's codes and stuff that organizations need to adhere to, but you at Disney take this kind of to the next level, because you really, again, you want, people with disabilities to come and have a great experience. So they come and spend their disposable income with you at Disney. Can you, as you, where you are today, 30 years into your Disney career, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, about how you got here?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, hi, everybody. I'm Mark, and I lead the accessibility work here physically at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando. Greetings, by the way, from sunny Orlando, Florida. Mike, I'm not quite 30. I'm getting close. This fall, I'll actually be at 24 years full-time in the role that I'm in. And as Mike shared, my title is officially the Manager of Accessibility and Services for Guests with Disabilities here at Walt Disney World Resort, which I think for your listeners, you might be aware, it's a pretty sizable property here. So that includes about 30 plus square miles of land here in Central Florida. And as part of that, that includes our 4 Walt Disney World theme parks: Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, Disney's Animal Kingdom. There are also 2 water parks. There's also an entertainment district called Disney Springs, and about 25 plus resorts, things like the Yacht Club and the Beach Club and the Boardwalk and all those resorts that exist across those many miles of property. And then there's other parts of the business that are under our scope as well. But I'm closing in, as I said, at about 24 years doing this great work. I have a real passion around accessibility. Although I don't have a disability myself, my journey began actually on day one of my life. I am what is known as a CODA. So many of your listeners might know that term. I'm a child of deaf adults. Both my parents are deaf. I also have one sibling, my older brother, Paul. He too is deaf. So growing up in West Hartford, Connecticut, I was the only person in my house that could hear. So with that, as I started to grow up, came some responsibilities and some things that my parents asked that I help with. My parents were very self-sufficient, very successful, but there were certain things during that time where, the technology perhaps wasn't as great as it is today, where I was kind of asked to kind of help out. So I would be assisting with things like answering the phone, Sometimes I would help answer the door. I might accompany my parents from time to time to various appointments or meetings they had if they needed somebody who could sign. And this, of course, all predates the ADA. But that was just kind of my upbringing in West Hartford. My brother, older brother Paul, actually attended the American School for the Deaf, which is in West Hartford as well. So my brother was able to go to school, but also be able to live at home. So that was kind of nice to have him around. Yeah, that was kind of my introduction to this work. Many CODAs that I know, like myself, all have vowed that when they got to the right age, they would never, ever, ever want to be involved in working with deaf people or providing interpreting, because that's what they did their whole life. I kind of said that a little bit, but fast forward a little bit in my timeline, and I actually found myself right in that work. And it's just something that I've had a passion for my entire life. I worked as a professional sign language interpreter for a while, was introduced to Disney as a young child. My grandparents lived in Florida, so every year we'd venture down for a vacation. We'd go to Walt Disney World, so I was introduced to that very early on. When I was in college, I attended the University of Tennessee. Go Volunteers. I participated in the Walt Disney World College program, which is an internship-based program where you would physically come to Orlando, be provided housing, and you would work in a theme park or resort for about a 6-month period of time. I had the pleasure of working on the college program at an attraction which brings a tear to my eye because it has since closed, but it's an attraction that was at Disney MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios. That attraction is called the Great Movie Ride. So I had a chance to work at the Great Movie Ride during my internship, met some great people from around the world. And loved it so much that I did a second internship and worked at the same location. And as time passed and other opportunities presented themselves, I had a chance to work in some other great companies. Also had a chance to work for Disney again at Disneyland Paris, at the Disneyland Paris Resort for about a year. And then was presented with something that I literally read about in one of the company newspapers, that there was a department that was forming. And this was in and around 1996, 97, a department that was forming called Services for Guests with Disabilities. I met with the manager of the department at the time, interviewed for a position, was hired to manage our sign language program specifically. And fast forward to where we chat here today, had some chance to do some other things within the accessibility organization. And now I actually lead that team. So I have 3 other employees that are cast members, as we call them, working for me on my team. And we get involved in projects and various things around the Walt Disney World Resort here in Orlando. So I know that was a long intro, but hopefully that adds Mike and team a bit more context to who I am and my passion in this work.
Mark, your passion clearly comes through. You just embody what I would imagine the Disney brand wants. There's so much energy and excitement to everything you're saying. So
I appreciate that. I really enjoy, Nina, going to work every day. You know, there is that uniqueness we're in right now, where we're a bit in more of a virtual work situation, but just working and being a part of the the overall guest experience here is just something I really enjoy.
So I was wondering if you could start. I mean, COVID has been obviously a really big impact on everything in the world. But I think it's really interesting. You know, how can you talk to us about how that's affected you and the work that you're doing around accessibility, and how that's impacted kind of Disney and the stuff that's going around accessibility as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think your listeners are aware that, over the past year, businesses have really had to start thinking about how they operate their business. Businesses, depending on the kind of business, were forced in many situations to close their doors for a period of time. And that's exactly what happened to us here in Orlando. We had a hope that the outbreak of COVID would be short-lived and we would be on the other side of it quickly, but that obviously was not the case. So we wound up shuttering the property, closing things down for many months, several months. We had the property more or less on a very skeleton crew, not a lot of people on the property. Obviously, the resorts closed, the theme parks closed. But a couple of months in, we had the opportunity to slowly reopen things. And we started at Disney Springs, which is our shopping district where we have various third-party restaurants and shops, and then many Disney-owned venues as well. We were able to slowly reopen that property in May. And then a few months later, in early July, we were able to start opening our 4 theme parks again. And with that came a lot of conversations, a lot of protocols that we needed to put in place, things we have never had to think about before. How do we allow people to gather in a situation where gathering of people's not necessarily a great thing because of what and how COVID works and how it spreads. So lots of protocols that were taken and implemented, things that everybody now thinks about, without batting an eye. I mean, things that are very now common. So things like masks and distancing and physical barriers and communication and hand washing. All those things were things we didn't really need to think about as thoroughly, but obviously we had to do that. So that led to a lot of conversations around, how could somebody with a disability also now start experiencing our property again. So I and the team were part of many of those conversations. I think we as a company have handled this very well. I think there's been a lot of success in how we've been able to operate, knowing, all the requirements that exist. Florida as a state has been a little bit more relaxed, I guess, from an oversight from the state government. So Disney, obviously, we wanted to make sure that we were doing our due diligence. So there were many things that we did that were even above and beyond what might have been required by the state. We're anxiously looking forward, by the way, to our partners elsewhere here in the U.S. So my partners out at the Disneyland Resort in California, I think many of your listeners might know that they are rapidly closing in on their reopening, which is going to be later this month in April. So exciting times, Nina, but certainly challenging. Many of our partners who are lead teams in the parks and the resorts, and those cast members, the frontline cast members that work out in the areas, they need to physically be on site in order for us to be open. So lots of training and a lot of protocols that those cast members are being asked to follow. And again, I think collectively looking back on over the last year, I think we've definitely done a great job in the approach. Things are certainly different. Guests' experiences are slightly different than perhaps what they might recall from the past. But I think all in all, a great experience for those guests who are willing to take the trip down to Florida.
Well, and my follow-up question to that is because we talked about in a previous introduction call about the work you did to bring the accessibility conversation to the company. This is pre-COVID, right? And to the experience, because you even as you're creating new experiences, new parks, new sites, that has to be a part of it. So how did that sort of help prepare for post-COVID? Did it? Do you feel like you were more prepared than most?
I'd like to say yes. I think something that's been near and dear to my immediate team over the years is the stressing of accommodations and accessibility as guest service and not basic compliance. I think there's varying opinions of that out there. There are those businesses out there that might just be looking at the code book to determine what they have to do, versus businesses like Disney, where we're looking at it like, hey, what's a really good guest experience? Like, how do we make an experience for any guest, including those with disabilities, really good? And that's kind of the goal, and that's been the goal. So that really tied into your question, which is, how can we provide a great guest experience for all guests during these more unique times? So I think we were pretty well positioned. And Disney, we're very good about strategizing an approach and how we're going to do something. We very rarely do something, react, or we very rarely do something that's just on a whim. Things are very planned out. We meet to have meetings to determine, hey, what's the right approach and how do we want to do this? Yes, it takes a little longer, but I think it allows us to deliver a product and deliver services and have policies that make sense versus it kind of being something that keeps shifting around.
Well, and I can tell you, as a person with a disability, and I've had the amazing experience at the Disney World and Disneyland properties, and I really did have an experience that was above other very similar industry locations and competitors, and so I can tell you, firsthand, and I'm not trying to get a free pass here, Mark. Although if you want to send me a Disney toaster, I wouldn't complain. So but truly, like I love that you're saying that, and at the end of the day, like there was just this morning there was a LinkedIn article that talked about the travel and entertainment industry. Finally, there's more organizations that are starting to embrace the economic impact that truly can be had by this community who has quite a bit of disposable income. So it kind of is a business advantage to actually think about this from more than just a compliance level. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And I was just gonna, I just wanted to throw in one thing real quick, because to the disposable income comment, but it's also too, Mike, like, there are parents who have a disability, like you're blind, but your son is not. And so wanting to still provide, an experience for them, I think is a big driver. And it's like, how do you have those big family experiences? I imagine, like when you talk about going to the mall with little man, I mean, there's just an inherent fear, right? That you can't keep track of them or something.
Totally. And that's the thing with the Disney, like, so the people with disabilities community, it's X size, right? So which is pretty sizable here in the US. It's 65 million that are identifying, right? So it's a fairly sizable community first and foremost, but then you realize, like, okay, these aren't just single people out there, right? They're parts of families and broader ecosystems, and there are a lot of friends and family who then want to take care of them a bit more and look after them a bit more. So absolutely, like it's there are stores and brands, period, that honestly the people with disabilities community completely avoid because they're not accessible. And so for Disney to then say, no, not only do we want to be, compliant, we want to make the experience as good as possible. That's what I love about this conversation, is because it's it really is an economic conversation. This isn't a, like, oh, well, I guess we have to do this. And you can hear that in the energy that you bring to this conversation, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think both of the comments you both just shared is exactly right. I think there's that guest service. Hey, why would we not want to do these things? And yes, there's absolutely a business advantage for us to do that. I mean, making something accessible for everybody only means that more people would want to experience it. Why would we not do that? So that's a part of those conversations we have all the time. It includes things when they're in the sort of the creative stage with our Walt Disney Imagineering partners, as we're looking to refurbish things that were built, back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, just trying to bring those kind of into the modern age, just ensuring that we're talking about accessibility early on in the process, and that it's not something we're talking about at, the 95%, check-in conversation and saying, oh yeah, oops. I mean, these are conversations that are happening many times when the design is still on a cocktail napkin, so we're talking about this kind of thing very early on, and just making sure that we're thinking about it correctly. I think we do that well. We absolutely don't have it nailed down 100%. We certainly still have opportunities to do things differently and do things better. But I think that's what I really love about the company, is we're willing to do that. One of the things that we've recently done that your listeners might have heard about is we have an internal set of sort of pillars or guidelines that we expect of all of our cast, and it's sort of those things that make you a successful cast member, and those things that make us a successful company. And those 4 pillars for many years have been safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. So those pillars have sort of guided us in everything that we do. We've very recently officially added a fifth pillar, a pillar that's been there and something that we've talked about, but we've not gone on the record to say, hey, we're making this now an actual pillar. And that pillar that is we've recently announced is inclusion. So we now have 5 pillars, with inclusion being the one that's sort of the key to unlock the rest. So it's, we've taken that bold approach to say, hey, we're going to go on the record and say that inclusion is important for us. And that's not just for people with disabilities. That's for people of race, color, and religion, and all of those things. We're going to make the bold statement that we're going to try to be better about that. And that's going to reflect itself in many of our offerings. Your listeners might have read about, for example, some updates we're going to be doing to the Jungle Cruise attraction, some updates we're going to be doing to the Splash Mountain attraction, updates that were done a few years ago to the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, just to just reflect the way things are today and make sure that we're not inadvertently creating challenges or barriers for guests of certain backgrounds.
What are some of those updates to those attractions? I'm kind of curious if you can share with us some of the.
Yeah, the Pirates attraction. There were at some point in the attraction's past, there were scenes that portrayed pirates chasing women in sort of a circular way, kind of almost like they're running around in a circle within one of the casitas or one of the buildings. And that was just it was kind of a ha-ha, kind of a laugh kind of thing. But, when you start thinking about that just doesn't, it's probably not a good message. Same thing true. There was a scene in the attraction where there were ladies being sold as property, and there were sort of pirates that were sort of bidding on that process. Again, not very inclusive. So those have been replaced with a bit of a different storyline. Splash Mountain, the film in which Splash Mountain is based, certainly has some challenges in it. So that is going to be switched over to a different experience. That's going to feature just again a more inclusive storyline, and then the Jungle Cruise. Certain things that you might see in the Jungle Cruise experience, reflecting natives and other things that were way more accepting back in the 50s and 60s when the Jungle Cruise was built. Those experiences are also going to be modernized, and scenes are going to be modernized to be more inclusive.
I love hearing that, and to think that, and I hate to say this, like the social norms, right? The accessible social norms of the 50s, 60s, maybe the 70s, that Disney is absolutely taking a hard look at this and saying, that doesn't represent our values.
Yep, exactly that one.
And I love hearing that. And, the fact of the matter is, like, there's a fairly significant tech company, Apple, that's had one of their values has been accessibility for a long time. They were the first big tech company to actually, put it down that one of their values was accessibility. And I'm telling you, within the people with disabilities community, it's kind of like a cult following for that brand, because they've said yes to us. And so the fact of the matter that Disney, so again, like thinking about that kind of, economic impact to the Disney brand, I just find it, and again, thinking of inclusion, it's bigger than the people with disabilities community. I totally agree with that. I love the idea of inclusion being a value and a pillar, because I think it's only going to make, Disney that much more amazing.
And it's been, those of us that are a lot closer to that work here internally with the company, I mean, we're very excited, because again, this is not a new conversation. This is something that we've talked about at length internally for many years. But now that, our executives have taken a stand, if you will, to say, hey, we need to officially make sure that our customers and our guests understand that inclusion is important to us. So that was kind of a big deal, especially the fact that the 4 pillars had been the 4 pillars for literally from the inception almost of our parks business. So we're talking like way back to like the 50s.
Yeah, I gotta say, I actually have, like, I think I went to Disney World 30 years ago now. And I actually remember the Pirates of the Caribbean scenes that you're talking about. And I think that, with Disney Plus coming out and, releasing all of the old catalog, or, opening up the Disney vault, as they said, of stuff, it was, there was a lot of things in there that you remember from your childhood as just being something that existed. And then, with your adult lens of, the 2020 lens, 2021 lens, you realize how problematic it is. And so it's really cool to see Disney like really thinking about that, deeply reflecting on it, and making changes. That's so important.
Mark, one of the things in our pre-conversation that it really, again, the leadership, obviously the passion that you bring to Disney, but the fact of the matter is that you also, I'd love for you to talk about a little bit of your experience and maybe close us out, because you take your leadership. Obviously, you don't take your IP or anything, but you take your leadership to this space, and you do talk to other brands and other organizations about, accessibility and services, that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about those, collaborative ventures that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there are several, large companies, large businesses out there who are kind of in the same business we are, specifically in the sort of parks and resorts business that I work in. You've got competitors out there that are big hotel operators, theme park operators, multi-experience resort properties, et cetera. And, accessibility is one of those things that we've chatted at length about and said, hey, accessibility isn't something that should be proprietary or unique to a single company. Like, we're all in this together. So I have regular conversations with what you would call competitors, other businesses out there who kind of do what we do. And we talk about accessibility and what they might be doing and what we might be doing. Obviously, we have to have some guardrails on how forthcoming we are about, future projects. But as far as things in the moment, or policies or procedures, or, here locally in Orlando, we many times have the same guests. People that visit Walt Disney World are also going to visit the other parks here in town. So, why not talk about it, and why not use real guest experiences as a reason for us to get better? If, we're not doing something, or we're not thinking about something in the right way, being able to kind of talk about that. So that's something that we try to do on a regular basis. And that, even goes beyond those theme parks and resorts. We also try to talk to businesses out there, larger companies. We're pretty involved in, some organizations out there that your listeners might be familiar with, that bring many companies together, kind of under that disability banner. We also try to leverage a lot of our advocates. So we have certainly some great advocacy organizations out there for varying types of disabilities and causes. And we try to be good partners to them and listen to what they have to say, and go to them when they might have questions for, various things or new policies or procedures. Another thing that's really awesome that we have is we have a large network of business employee resource groups here at Disney. So ERGs would be another name for those. One of those ERGs, it's actually one of the ones that I co-chair with another cast member, is called Enabled. And we have an Enabled Florida chapter. Enabled Florida is specifically for those cast members, crew, and employees who either have disabilities or have a passion around accessibility because of just a family member, or just maybe just a passion. And it's a volunteer organization for cast, crew, and employees. And we give them opportunity to participate in workshops and presentations and various speakers that we bring in, so folks can stay connected in the work, although they may not, have a day job that focuses on accessibility. The ability for cast members to participate in accessibility topics, is huge. And then we then use those cast members, crew, and employees as a way for us to have a sounding board for ideas. So when we're developing something new or refurbishing something old, and we want to get the lens of, well, what does a person with a particular disability think about this? We have that internal network that we're able to leverage of employees who live that daily to be able to get that perspective. So I think all of those things combined, back to that original point, Mike, is, accessibility isn't one of those things that needs to be guarded or kept as some sort of trade secret. This is something that all businesses should openly chat about and be able to share ideas back and forth, because I think that's the only way we're really going to see true inclusion across the board.
Oh, love it. I mean, that's such the perfect way to close out, because exactly, like, if you're not doing that, if you're not being inclusive, you're literally the opposite. And so you can't, you can't spout out to the world that you are this inclusive place when you're not willing to truly be inclusive, truly share what you've learned with others. And I think it's just so cool to see Disney leading a lot in efforts that truly do impact people globally. I think it's just amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for again just being responsive to just kind of almost a sales pitch. I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you about a podcast, and your willingness to do that. Again, it shows your just your true passion about talking about this topic. Obviously, I mean, you do look at this as it's bigger. It's not just intellectual property. Yes, Disney has a lot of that in and around this, but accessibility is just it's good for us to talk about this. Like, we have to get that conversation out there. It will make the world a more inclusion friendly place, a more inclusive place, period. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your passion with us and our guest today. So thank you very much, Nina and Ubaldo. Thank you, as always, for being my amazing co-host. And Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Awesome. And thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can see closed captioning for this podcast on our YouTube channel. You can find us online on our website, chooseinclusion.com, and contact us on Twitter @chooseinclusion.